Overnight, Iranian-backed militia in Iraq now calling for U.S. forces to be pushed out of that country. This comes after a series of U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria targeting these militias. CNN's Arwa Damon is live in Istanbul with the very latest rising tensions in an already tense region. Arwa.
Yeah, and that might even be an understatement, John, given how serious the situation is, with Iraq basically telling both Washington and Tehran to stop using it as a proxy battlefield. Iran also has now warned of grave consequences following these strikes, which, according to the Pentagon, targeted 5 areas, 3 of them in Iraq, 2 of them in Syria. The Pentagon saying that they were going after arms depots, weapons depots, as well as command and control centers belonging to this Shia militia known as Kata'ib Hezbollah. It is backed by Iran and was in fact one of the militias that the U.S. put under this umbrella called the special groups that were especially active in targeting the U.S. military back during the days of the U.S.-led occupation of Iraq. The militia itself has said that at least some 25 people were killed, another 51 injured in these strikes. They put out a statement calling on their forces to begin preparing and planning for more operations to push, as they said, the enemy America out of the country. Now, Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi has called these strikes a violation of Iraq's sovereignty. He was informed that the strikes would take place about half an hour before they did. He then asked that the U.S. restrain. America, however, as we know, did not, and he is warning of a grave escalation. Now, the U.S. has come close to retaliating against Iran in the past. If you'll remember, there were those strikes against oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, and then Iran's downing of a U.S. drone. America, however, did restrain itself on those occasions. In this case, these particular attacks were in response to an attack outside of Kirkuk on a facility that was housing U.S. military personnel that ended up killing one U.S. contractor. Of course, the great concern in all of this is that if this situation escalates, that is detrimental not just to the stability of Iraq, but that of the region as a whole.
Arwa, thank you very much. And the broader picture here and the stability of the region is critical. Let's talk to CNN military and diplomatic analyst Rear Admiral John Kirby. He is, of course, former press secretary at the Pentagon as well. Good morning to you. We'll get to the stability question in the region in a moment, but just talking about this group, because this is a group responsible for 11 rocket attacks in 2 months, places where Americans are based in Iraq. The attack, the most recent one in Kirkuk, killed a U.S. contractor, wounded 4 American troops. Explain the significance of these strikes.
Well, what the airstrikes by the U.S. were meant to retaliate against this group and their ability to conduct these kinds of attacks in the future. So they hit ammunition facilities, they hit a command and control facility, all trying to take out their ability to do this again, and also to send a very strong message that we're not going to accept it. Now we have to see what the reaction is. I mean, this group is supported by Iran through their proxy organizations. So we'll have to see, how not only the militia groups react, but how Iran reacts as well.
I wonder what your read is on the Wall Street Journal editorial board writing, Trump finally fires back Iran. Let me read part of their opinion piece that struck me. Quote, "It's about time," they write, "Mr. Trump's reluctance to use force in response to previous Iranian attacks is one reason why General Soleimani, of course, the Quds force, may feel that he can get away with more attacks." Do you agree? And will these strikes from the U.S. now deter any future potential attacks?
Well, certainly we're meant to deter. I think that's a very open question, Poppy, whether or not they'll be successful. I suspect Iran will try to respond in some way. It most likely won't be in kind, but what we'll have to see. And look, and I understand where the Wall Street Journal is coming from. The president has shown more restraint than I think some people would like him to have shown in going after Iran in the past. This one is a little different, though. We're not talking about them shooting down a drone or attacking tankers. We're talking about Shia-backed, Iranian-backed Shia militias. So not Iranian forces, not Iranian armed forces, but militias on the ground. And this strike was very proportional. They struck at facilities that they know were involved in those prior 11 rocket attacks that we've seen over the last 2 months. So it was very proportional, very discreetly done.
Listen to this from Defense Secretary Mark Esper. He was speaking yesterday and notably did not rule out further action. Here he was.
I would note also that we will take additional actions as necessary to ensure that we act in our own self-defense and we deter further bad behavior from militia groups or from Iran.
What does that tell you, Admiral Kirby, about where the administration's mindset is now? Because the Wall Street Journal was referencing the fact that they did not respond in June after the drone was downed or after the Saudi oil field attacks back in September.
Yeah, so the key phrase in what that the clip you just showed was as necessary. So I suspect what's happening now is U.S. Central Command, in charge of our forces in the region, are looking at their force protection measures and taking necessary precautions to increase it as appropriate, including perhaps even force posture changes we don't know right now. But they're getting ready for whatever reaction that ought to come from Iran. I think there is very little appetite by this administration and certainly by the military to escalate this further. And I think it's important to remember that when we talk about escalation, it was the Iranian, the Shia-backed militias really that have been the ones escalating, the level of tension over the last couple of months.
Absolutely. Finally, before you go, what is your take on the response from Iraq's prime minister, calling it a violation of Iraq's sovereignty? As we understand it, there was no coordination with Iraq, but they were notified before the strikes. What do you make of this?
Well, two things. One, I mean, they've got their own domestic politics to deal with. They've had huge protests by a disaffected young population in Iraq that accuses their government of corruption and mismanagement. So they have a domestic issue there to deal with. They also want to keep a good relationship with Iran. That's their neighbor. The prime minister and the government are Shia, so they are tied, at least from a religious perspective, to Iran. They know they have to have that relationship in good standing. But I found it ironic that, the Iraqi prime minister is accusing the Americans of violating their sovereignty when A, we're on the ground at their request to help support them in their fight against ISIS, and B, they haven't said boo about the Iranian support for militia groups inside their country, which has been firing on those very same coalition forces that they want, to be there. So I find it highly ironic.
Admiral Kirby, thank you.